On this episode of the AVB Podcast, we have come here to the beautiful town of Montebello, Quebec. This is my second time here, but my first time to be able to sit down with the founder of Montebello Rock, Mr. Alex Martel. How's it going, man?
I'm good. And yourself?
Excellent. Thank you for having me to your home office. I don't know what we're calling this, but it's a
bunker.
Bunker. It's great. As I was sort of telling you when I first walked in the door, my first real festival experience was last year. It was coming here to Montebello to sort of see the festival. I've never been to anything kind of this size of it. I'm a musician as well, play locally or whatever. But I've never been like the festival guy. And last summer was really kind of my first experience. I've been to concerts, whatever. But this was different. And it really sort of, like, there's so much going on in this town during those 3 days. And it was a lot to absorb, and I can't wait to get into all of it with you. So, A, thank you for the festival that you've been throwing for the last, this is going 14 years now, right? Mm-hmm. And B, thank you for having us here. I'm going to start with you the same way we start with all of our guests. I want to know about the house you grew up in, the town you grew up in, brothers and sisters, mom and dad, all of that stuff. Right?
Well, basically, I grew up here in Montebello and lived here my whole life. Right. My parents had a house in a neighborhood in the mountain here near the golf course. Okay. And I don't have any brothers or sisters, so I was just kind of isolated, I guess, in that neighborhood that's more like, in the woods, basically. Okay. So, I guess I was left alone with music. And I guess that's part of why I became such a music fan. I was just kind of in my own world, my own bubble. And, I always wanted to perform. I remember when I was a little kid, I would go up basically we had like a few steps separating like the living room from the dining room. Mm-hmm. So I would have my parents sit in the living room and I would go up those steps and like perform as if it was a stage, basically.
And they would sit and put up with that shit?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I grew up here and, I got to travel a lot. Like my parents loved traveling and, so, it's like...
what kind of traveling?
My mom was actually a teacher and she would organize like trips for her students and I would come along. Okay. So, I went to Italy on a trip like that. We used to go to Florida all the time and we did like cross-country trips in Canada and the US and, a bunch of other places. I guess from a young age, even though I come from a small town, I've always kind of been exposed to the world. And, I guess, I always felt like I don't really fit here in the sense that, there's like, how can I say it? Like, I guess the stereotype of like small town people, right. And I guess I never really fit into that.
Talk to me about this town specifically, because that is almost not knowing anything else about the area or the festival or whatever. When you come here for the first time and you come through the town and it's that weekend of the festival, and I understand it's totally different that weekend than any other time because I've just seen it. But like, it's this quaint little quiet, you can tell right away, it would normally be a very quiet, sort of like out of the way place with 200,000 people sort of walking through it now all of a sudden, right? But talk to me about the town itself, because it's got all this like high-end architect, like it's got a Fairmont Hotel here, and then it's got all this high-end architecture, and then there are some houses that are like clearly wood shacks and have been for 100, like it's a weird town. Talk to me, tell me what you can about the history of the town, like what you know about it.
Well, there's lots of history in this town, and the Louis-Joseph Papineau, the patriot, used to live here, and he still has his manor here. Now you can visit it like as a museum, I guess. Then, they built the Fairmont Chateau Montebello, which was a private club in like the 30s or something. Okay. And, they had a bunch of summits there with like world leaders, like, G7 type stuff.
Oh, wow, okay. But like, why here? Like, why? Because that was the thing that struck me so much, right? Is because that thing's a castle. right? Like Fairmont Hotel is like a log cabin castle.
Yeah.
And it's in the middle of the mountains. Like it seems to me like as an outsider that there's no reason for it to be there.
Well, I guess it was a retreat, so people from the cities and, pretty much all over the world would come here. It was a private club, so they would just kind of retreat here, kind of, in the countryside, surrounded by nature and mountains and everything. Mm-hmm. So I guess that was the reason for them to come here. And, it kind of always remained a good place for tourism, aside from the chateau and the manor. There's also, the Parc Omega, which is like a zoo, basically, where you drive through and you can feed the animals and stuff. Cool. It's a nice town, and it's always been a nice place for tourism, and tourists that are way different than the rock festival.
Yes. Well, yeah, because that's the other thing too, right? Like, to sort of kind of jump all over the place a little bit. The Rockfest crowd is a bunch of punk rock metalheads, and this place looks like it's normally very upscale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's a good contrast. Yeah. But at the same time, I guess at first, in the first couple of years, people probably had like, ignorant opinions on that type of crowd, thinking, it was just a bunch of bums and, but, this, like, in metal fans or punk fans or rock fans, I mean, it's all types of people. Yeah. And, we have like lawyers and doctors and, there's like everything. Right. And those people have money, same as people, coming here as tourists the rest of the year. And I guess the people in the town quickly figured that out, and right. They've been accepting, towards that crowd, even though sometimes they have mohawks or long hair or tattoos or whatever. Right. And I guess they just I guess for some people at first it was just kind of a clash, Mm-hmm. Like I remember like hearing some old farmers telling me like, I saw this guy and he had like green hair. I never saw that in my life, So I guess it was kind of a clash because some people here, they and I don't want to sound like cliche, but they're really small town people.
Yeah,
they're
not
really
travel,
right? Like, I mean, they drive 45 minutes to Ottawa, and to them that's like a road trip,
right.
So I guess there was kind of a clash, of different cultures and everything at first. But, the people here are really accommodating.
Did you enjoy that aspect of it at first? Because, like, for my audience, so that they know this, so that we can get in, you started this festival when you were fucking 17 years old. Okay, that in and itself is amazing to me. All right, and I want to get to that part. But you're a 17-year-old punk, right? Was there a part of you that was kind of like, fuck you guys, look what I did?
I don't know if I necessarily had that attitude, I started it for several reasons, and, one of the reasons is that I kept having to travel all over the place to go see shows and festivals and stuff, and my parents were super cool. Like, they would drive me, to like, for instance, Ozfest in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
When I was like 15 or 16.
Okay.
And, I would go to shows all the time, and I would somehow always sneak backstage and become friends with the bands.
You were that kid, eh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So, instead of, I guess, doing the normal stuff that teenagers do on the weekends and like, hang out with their friends and drink or whatever it is, I would like go to shows and concerts and hang out backstage with the bands, and I was like this 15-year-old kid.
I've got some friends who have some great, like, this is how we snuck backstage stories. I want to know how you sneak backstage at 15 when mom and dad are in the crowd.
Well, they were actually waiting for me in the car.
They would drive you to Pennsylvania for a show and then wait out in the car.
Yeah, well, for Pennsylvania, maybe
Sure.
they did some other stuff,
right.
but you know, if it was like in Montreal or Quebec City or whatever, you know, my dad would like wait in the car and read magazines, and then you know, we were like, now we want to meet the band and sneak backstage or whatever, so he would wait until like sometimes 2 or 3 a.m. and then drive back, and you know, we would sleep in the car. So
what's your dad's background? You said your mom's a teacher. What did your dad do?
He has construction companies.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's helped like with the festival. Like, you know, he actually built the stage the first year with my uncle. So, you know, it was like super amateur because we didn't have money to like rent an actual like stage line or whatever. But yeah, he's always helped, and he's still there every year with his tractor helping.
Your whole family is still involved in this, right? I think I met your mom.
Well, maybe you met my grandmother.
Oh, your grandmother at the media tent.
My grandmother greets the media when they arrive at the festival, which is pretty cool. But yeah, she's like in her 80s now, and you know, she's still a volunteer at the festival every year. She's been there since the very first year.
It's really interesting because you've got a father. You said your father owns his construction company, right? So he's got a business mindset to begin with, and he would have probably. I'm guessing you picked up some of that from him.
Oh, maybe, but not necessarily in the sense that, you know, the music industry is so different. But I guess what I probably picked up from him is not having a boss and just being your own boss.
Yeah.
You know, I'm probably like the worst employee in the world. So I was like, you know, I'm going to work for myself. So.
Did you recognize that fairly early on?
Yeah, well, you know, I had like student jobs and stuff, and I just hated it. And, you know, I would like listen to music and read like music magazines instead of actually doing my job. So, you know, that's all I wanted to do, you know, to just do stuff that had to do with music. And
talk me through that first festival. Talk me through, you're this 17-year-old kid who's been sneaking into concerts for a couple of years with dad's help now, right? And now you decide, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Who's the first person you tell?
Well, just to give some background, basically, I would help like lots of local bands like promote their shows and stuff in the area. And
is there much of a because local music scene seems to me like you and 4 other guys occasionally.
Well, there were like maybe, you know, 3 or 4 bands in the area here, and you know, one of them was called Yuko, and they were like really good friends, and I helped them like promote their shows, and I would like sign up to be on the street teams of like several like bigger bands, like you know, national bands or international bands. And when I started college, I signed up to be in college radio, and they needed funds to get an antenna so it could broadcast, you know, its shows outside of the actual building. Mm-hmm. I think they still don't have it to this day, but at least we had tried. And you know, they basically asked me to help set up some local shows like in the CJEP. And you know, everyone was telling me, like, I was in Saint-Jérôme, and everyone was telling me like, oh, the scene is dead here, no one goes to local shows anymore. And you know, I was so determined, I basically plastered the entire city, and those shows were all packed. So no one had seen anything like that. So I was like, you know, maybe I have a drive and some kind of talent. I would hope to, you know, to promote shows. And that's when I really wanted to do something here in my hometown, because when I was a kid, they had these big parties for the Quebec national holiday, Saint Jean-Baptiste. Okay. And they did it at the marina here in Montebello. And I just remember being a kid and going there, and, you know, it was by the river, and, you know, fireworks, and the beginning of the summer. And I don't know, I guess it stuck with me, and I always felt like it would be amazing to do something like that here, but for rock music, you know, instead of like traditional Quebec music, whatever. Right. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start it. The other reason was, you know, I had started my own band, Deadly Apples, and at that point...
Wait, Deadly Apples been around since you were 17?
Yeah, basically in high school, but that's like the older version of the band. Like,
sure.
Like, you know, I was like with musicians that could barely play.
Right.
And, you know, we were like super amateur, and so obviously no one wanted to book us because we sucked. and that was part of the reason why.
If only you knew a promoter.
yeah. So you know, that's what I figured. Like, I'm just gonna start my own festival and book my own band.
Book your own band.
And you know, Deadly Apples was the first band to play the first rock fest, so I opened my own festival the first year, which is pretty cool. So you know,
who was the headliner the first year?
It was Grimskunk,
okay.
The band that's pretty well known in Quebec.
Okay.
And it was just 3 bands: Grimskunk, Yuko that I mentioned earlier, and Deadly Apples. That was it.
3 bands.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
talk to me about that show. How do you know what your gate count was?
We had 500 people, which was already pretty good.
It's still
for
pretty,
Montebello,
yeah.
Considering the population is 900.
Yeah.
But yeah, initially it was supposed to be in 2004, the first year, but then, you know, I just figured like I needed more time, and
okay.
So I ended up doing it in 2005, the first year. And you know, I just went to see a guy named Pierre Bertrand, who was actually a city councilor, and he actually still is, and he was a mayor for some years as well. And you know, I just, you know, knocked on his door and was like, hey, you know, I'm told you're the guy, you know, if I want to rent, you know, it used to be like a baseball field over
sure.
there. And you know, he came to show me like the little restaurant there, and you know, how where the power was,
right.
and you know, all those things. And yeah, it just kind of started there. And
what was the big lesson you took out of that first one?
Well, something crazy happened that first year. Like right before we opened doors, there was like a massive storm that just hit Montebello, and it was literally like a mini tornado of some kind.
Okay.
Like I had never seen anything like that, and
right.
I've never seen anything like it since. But literally, like it destroyed the entire field. Like, you know, we had like signage. It all like went away in the wind.
Wow. This is your first festival and you're a 17-year-old kid, and God goes, no, fuck you.
Yeah, you know, the equipment was like full of water, and you know, so we had like to push back everything an hour later. We had like blowers for leaves that we used to like try to dry the stage and stuff. And you know, everyone just kind of, you know, got together and tried to like fix everything, and you know, get some new equipment, because I guess some of the sound and lights, you know, were filled with water,
right?
And yeah, we just made the show happen. But you know, it came very close to not happening that very first year.
I think that's important though, right?
Well, you know, I guess it started pretty roughly.
But I think having a start like that, like, lets you know right away, like, this is work. Because I talked to a bunch of festival people, right? And mm-hmm. the storm scenario is the worst case scenario, right? Yeah. It's because it just wipes out your whole thing. Mm-hmm. And you're very first, like, had you even been thinking about that potential?
I don't remember. I would think so.
Right.
But,
well, you definitely think about it now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, we've been pretty lucky. Like, for, you know, aside from that storm that happened before the festival started, like I think for like the first 11 or maybe like the first 11 years, we didn't have like any rain whatsoever. So every year people were like, "This is crazy! Like, you have a pact with the devil or something," you know. So yeah, we've been pretty lucky. Talk
to me about the growth, because it was a fairly slow growth, right? Like, it didn't become huge overnight.
Yeah, you know, it was you know, I guess different steps. The second year was pretty similar to the first year. Third year started getting a little bigger. It was the first year that we had 2 stages and bands for like a whole day.
Gotcha.
I had pretty much copied like the model of Ozfest with like, a second stage during like the beginning of the day, and then, later in the evening, the main stage starts.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first year that we had people from Montreal and outside the area coming to the festival. And I remember like we were so impressed. Like, we saw people coming and we didn't know who they were. so we were like,
that's great.
That was a big deal to us. And, I just remember being really impressed by it.
Right.
Then,
do you remember the first time the festival got like attention outside of the area, like you say, Montreal or whatever? Like, do you remember the first time media started paying attention, that kind of thing?
I think, it's, I guess, a little bit more every year.
Right.
In terms of attendance, like, I remember 2011 was another huge step. Okay. And, by that point, we were 2 days. And, that year we had NoFX, Pennywise, Lamb of God, Hatebreed, and a bunch of other bands. And I remember like before we opened the doors, I was wondering like, is there lots of people already waiting? And I was expecting, maybe like a small line or something. So I walked up a stage to like see the entrance, and like the entire street where the entrance was, like, the full length, and like the entire street was like packed. And just at that very moment, I had never seen so many people at once in Montebello, and that was just the line before we opened doors. And I was like, wow, like I couldn't believe it. So I started telling my staff, like, come and see this, and that was definitely a cool moment.
Right.
And
when was the first time, I'm guessing that might have been it, but when was the first time you noticed the town changing because of the festival? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it was gradual. But, the year that everything exploded, like literally, was in 2013. We like tripled the attendance that year. And we definitely weren't ready for it, and
okay.
The people I had hired for logistics and everything were definitely not ready for it and totally overwhelmed. And that's the year where we had like lots of growing pains, and
talk to me through some of those.
The old story of like toilets overflowing,
okay.
And
the basic stuff, right?
Yeah, everything that could go wrong. And that was the year we had Marilyn Manson and Alice Cooper, and they actually showed up late, so it kind of delayed that whole day where they were playing. It's like every problem that could happen happened that year.
Right.
But that was like the real massive breakthrough year where it was still big a few years before, but that year was like, that's when it became the largest rock festival in Canada. And, we got like crucified, or I got crucified in the media because of all the logistical issues. But at the same time, I think all the festival goers still really enjoyed their experience. And it was like, it was such a unique experience, and it was so chaotic, and the
chaos has a bit of a like draw to it too, right?
Yeah, and people talk about that year now like it's it's like a myth or something.
Right.
It's like you had to be there, and it was special, and it really was a happening. And despite all like the bad press we had and the issues and everything, the following year we had like even way more people. And it felt like, it really put the festival on the map, and also kind of, set the stage for, how can I put it? Like, we had like so many controversies and stuff over the years, which just kind of added to the myth of Rockfest, you
right.
know, like it's such like a unique special event where like anything goes, and
because you can't describe it, right? Coming into town, you've got, well, I guess I'm about to try. Coming into town, you have cars lined up along the main strip, both sides coming in. Yeah. The town itself is shut down. You've got people literally camped out on, like I last year I saw people had pitched tents in the backs of pickup trucks along the sides of the road, right? Yeah. You've got this giant campground right across the street from where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. And then you've got this festival plaza that's like a block and a half, 2 blocks from where we're sitting right now.
Yeah.
Basically the entire town turns into the festival.
Yeah, pretty much.
Going from that 500 person, 1 stage, 3 bands to what I saw last year, there's a lot of differences, right? Logistics and all of that stuff aside, money changes all of that shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the residents here definitely made lots of money every year because of the festival, and you know, that I guess that helps the fact that they've become you know, so accommodating to the festival goers, and you know, at the same time it kind of created an imbalance in the sense that, you know, the festival never made a dime on everything that goes on in the town. So, you know, that definitely hurt us over the years. But
up until now, because this is one of those, because I saw an interview with you recently where you were talking about this, because that's part of the thing you're trying to change this year, right? Is trying to sort of incorporate all of that a little bit more, kind of get a grasp on all of that. Correct?
Yeah, you know, there just needs to be a better balance. You know, like the idea was never to prevent the locals from making money, you know, because we know if that happens, then, you know, they just won't be supportive of the event.
Sure.
But, you know, there needs to be a balance, because if, you know, there's no more event, then everyone loses everything. So that's kind of what I'm working on with the city right now, and you know, for the new event, Montebello Rock, to make sure that, you know, we find, I guess, a proper balance and, you know, a good middle ground where, you know, everyone is happy and the festival can actually be profitable and keep on going.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just so that it's not left on the table, last year, so the festival grew up to be gigantic. Last year you had some major issues, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe in a nutshell, you want to walk me through what the big issue from last year was, like what the overall, because you ended up declaring bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if it's you or the corporation or how, I'm assuming it's the corporation, right? Kind of, can you give me, I don't want to get into the details and stuff, but can you give me kind of an overview? Like, do you have a takeaway of what the major problem was?
Well, I mean, just to put things in context, like the festival got so huge, and then the cash flow needs were so massive that after 10 years, I just couldn't go on my own. You know, like I had to find, you know, partners to help me, you know, financially for the festival, and because I wanted to keep it, you know, massive, and at that point, like, I had found some partners, and they basically became majority partners, and I had to become a minority partner.
Just based on the financial imbalance?
Yeah, pretty much. And, you know, so I remained like the spokesperson, because, you know, the festival goers already knew me, and, you know, I'll always be the founder, obviously. So I stayed the spokesperson, and also the artistic director. So, you know, I would keep doing like building the lineups and stuff. So that's how it was for the last 3 years.
Okay.
You know, it's always been a difficult business, you know, especially when the festival got really massive. Like, people would always assume, oh, you know, those guys must all be millionaires or billionaires. And, you know, I heard so many crazy stuff. But in reality, like, you know, I've always done it out of passion. And I always told people that, you know, if I was in this for money, I would have quit a long time ago. You know, I'm just a music fan, and that's why I'm doing it. And I love what I do, and that's why I keep doing it. You know, there's, I mean, I could talk like for a long time about like all of these challenges, you know, just like the exchange rate, which has been bad.
Oh yeah, because most of your festival has to get paid in US.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't even think about that portion of it.
You know, if we pay one band $1 million, then it becomes 1.3 or 1.4 million dollars Canadian, which is crazy. Plus, bands keep charging more and more money, even though they don't draw as many people. Festival goers, I guess, have become there's like no way to impress them anymore, because, you know, not only with Rockfest, but with like most of the big festivals, you know, there was like a boom of like all these crazy massive lineups, and people were like, holy shit, and then you have to top it the next year and the next year. But after a while of just being like, you know, fed with like these massive lineups all the time, I guess, you know, the expectations are just unrealistic. And, you know, even if you have a lineup with like, you know, Metallica and Green Day and Foo Fighters and Rage Against the Machine, and you put all these massive acts together, there's still going to be a bunch of people complaining, oh, this sucks, or, you know, this band isn't there, or it's too expensive. So it's like it became to a point, and not just with Rockfest, that, you know, people are just like, you know, so selective, I guess, and there's so many options.
Rob Petroni from Blues Fest Windsor kind of says, at this point, unless you're throwing the concert in their backyard, like from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. for free, somebody's going to find something to complain about.
So, you know, I guess my point is that there's many challenges, and it's always been difficult. And, you know, it was a tough year financially. You know.
How was attendance last year? Like, because that wasn't the big issue, right?
Well, attendance was down, so you know, the ticket sales weren't where they needed to be.
See, I have no comparison, because last year was my first year, and it still seemed pretty massive to me.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, basically what happened is, after the festival, I was convened to a meeting by my former partners, and they basically gave me the preliminary financial results, and basically told me that they made the decision to use the bankruptcy law, like the protection, to seek new partners and you know, new investors, basically, to take over the festival. And they hired this firm to help do this. And you know, it was just like a horrible experience for me on every level, but I tried to help that firm in the official process, and that lasted for 6 months with no results. So that's when the old entity basically went bankrupt in late December. And at that point, you know, as bad as that situation was, the good news was that, you know, I was now free, you know, in the sense that I'm no longer tied to, you know, other partners or whatever. So
can you, and I don't want to get into the details of like the legal side of it, but talk to me about the emotional side of it. Because like, I've seen you in interviews, right? And I mean, you're a bit of a rock star, you're in your own right. And you've got that ability to sort of sit there and kind of, you know, be cool and talk about it or whatever. But like, this has been your entire fucking life.
Yeah.
And it made like massive media last year. And talk to me just emotionally and mentally what it was like to kind of go through that.
Well, you know, when I found out what was going to happen, and when I realized that, you know, there was nothing I could do about it, and believe me, I did everything I could to prevent this, and, you know, my longtime staff helped me, but, you know, it didn't work, and, you know, the decision was made, and that was it. You know, it was just like literally the worst moment of my life, because and not even like on a financial level, you know, because I probably lost more than anyone else, but it was more on, as you said, I guess an emotional level, because I spent my whole life building that festival and building relationships with suppliers, with bands, and it was lots of bands I became close friends with. So what happened was like the opposite of how I am and how I think, and I'm not how can I say it, I definitely made tons of mistakes over the years.
Sure.
And I'm not denying that, and I guess the reason for that was that I always did it out of passion, and my goal was like, let's build the craziest lineup ever and try to make that work financially. It was never about like, how can we turn the best bigger business profit,
Yeah.
It was really done from the perspective of a music fan, like I would build these lineups and impress myself and be like, holy shit, this is amazing. Plus the fact that it's actually happening in my backyard, literally.
Right. I want to know when in your head you decided you were going to go forward.
I had to make the decision pretty quickly.
Were you forced into making the decision?
No, I could have taken a year off or whatever, but at that point in December, I was just like, what do I do? Do I want to continue? Do I want to take a break? I looked into all options, but I was like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I want to move forward and I want to make things right, and, try to, I guess, because I guess when these things happen, usually, people just call it quits and they disappear or whatever.
Slink off into the night. Yeah.
But since it was never my intention or my decision for this to happen, I was like, what else am I going to do? Like, I've done this my whole life and this is what I'm passionate about. And, I'll try to fix things, even if it's just symbolically, And I knew I had the support from the festival goers and from, several bands that reached out to me, even those who were affected by it. And that really, really touched me. And
are you willing to talk about that? Like,
I don't want to
get
into
a little personal
stuff,
but it's just, that to me seems like I'm a musician at the end of the day, right? And you can put all the rock star shit around it you want, but at the end of the day, musicians are musicians. We're just a bunch of guys that like to play music and hang out and have a good time.
Yeah.
And you telling me that and whoever it is, you telling me that there's a band that came to the festival, got affected by the bankruptcy, and they called you up later and were like, dude, to me, that's kind of like, that's what music is supposed to be to begin with.
Yeah.
So, and I understand if you don't want to get into the details, but that kind of, it says something.
Yeah.
About the industry.
Yeah, well, it's not the case for all the bands.
Of course.
But I think most people know what I'm about, and that's kind of why I wanted to keep going. And I actually worked for like a full month on a first version of this new event that ended up not working.
Okay.
And then I started to work on the second event, which ended up being Montebello Rock. And, it's, the reaction has been great from the festival goers. Like, I knew it couldn't be like something massive as Rockfest used to be. And that model no longer worked financially. So, even if that's what I wanted to do, there was no point in like, fucking up a second time. So, and lots of festival goers were like, we had fun even when it was smaller, before it exploded and everything. So that kind of pushed me in the direction of like, let's do a Back to the Roots event, which is going to be like way smaller, getting back to, punk rock, metal, hardcore, what it was before it got more diverse, I guess. And, just do like this event for the fans and based on, really just the Montebello experience, because what was hard every year was, like, the biggest expense by far was always the programming, like the bands. And we realized, like, just one example, in 2017 we had Rammstein, which was amazing. I'd heard about
this. This made news, right? Like, the price that you ended up paying was problematic or something.
I don't think so, but I mean, yeah, it definitely cost shitloads of money. Right. And it was amazing. I love the band; they're a great band, and I'm proud of achieving that, because it was basically organizing a festival inside a festival, because they have such a massive production and everything. But I guess my point was, even with such a massive headliner, that didn't necessarily bring the attendance up, because our audience doesn't necessarily need such a massive headliner. Like, we had smaller headliners the previous year and people still came out. So I guess, moving forward now with this new smaller event, and just with the presale that we've done for Montebello Rock, like, it's amazing, and we haven't announced a single band, and even the previous year for Rockfest 2018, like, half the tickets were sold before we announced a single band. So I guess that says a lot about our audience, for which, many of them, it's a tradition, and they just come back to Montebello every year, regardless of who's playing. And some of them even said, like, even if there's no bands playing, we're still going to show up and party in Montebello. So, that's kind of more the idea, I guess, for this new Montebello Rock event. And,
I'm sure you don't have all the logistics down and stuff, but if I come this year, what am I going to notice different this year from last year? Obviously, the size is you're 2 stages rather than 3 stages, right?
Yeah, it's going to be 2 stages and 30 bands. Because that was something that festival goers complained about in the past, that, at some point we had like 130 bands playing in like 2 days and 1 evening, which was just crazy. It was like a marathon. So, last year we already scaled it down a bit, and the reaction was super positive, because people, were able to see all the bands they wanted to see instead of missing like half of them or whatever. And plus, every band would play longer sets. So, this year I'm going even more in that direction, basically. So that's kind of the overall idea, just to kind of bring back to where Rockfest was in the early years, not like the first year where, it was like
500 people.
A homemade stage. But, I guess just before it started exploding and become super massive. So, we're going to do this first year and see how it goes. But, I'm doing it with my family and my longtime staff, and it's just going to be a fun experience, and also a way for me to, I guess, rebuild the bridges that were burned by what happened, and just, I guess, show everyone again, what I'm about, and so far it's been very positive. So.
Was it tough getting into the public eye and making this announcement?
Which one?
Of the new festival.
I guess it was, in the sense that, for months I had to like deal with the situation, and for months I had no control over what was going to happen, up until late December. I had no idea, if, some outside investor was going to step in and, I guess save the old entity. And if that wasn't the case, if I was going to continue and how I would do it and everything. So just getting to that point where I could finally announce this is what I'm doing, it just felt like a huge relief, in a sense that, finally, that this is out and this is what I'm working on. And yeah, I'm happy I did it. And, once again, like the festival goers are super happy about it, and the response has been great.
Are you the lead singer of the Deadly Apples, or are you the head of the Montebello Rock Fest?
I guess I'm both.
But do you think about it that way?
I mean, I like both,
Yeah.
And, we, like Deadly Apples, I reactivated the band maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
Because we had been on hiatus for like 7 years.
Oh, okay.
Because the festival was just exploding in popularity, and it became overwhelming. So I had to really just focus on the rapid growth of the festival. But it's been great since we reunited. As I was telling you earlier, like last year we went on a 2-month tour of the U.S. with Marilyn Manson.
Talk to me about that.
I mean, I'm trying to think of stories that I can actually say on camera.
I'm not even looking for I am looking for those details, but we'll shut the camera off for them. But I'm more sort of like, I don't know, man. You've got this weird life, right? Because you do have this sort of like, you've got this rock star quality to you. You've got this festival thing going on. You're attached to all the big names or whatever. But like, I've been here with you for about an hour, and you don't seem like you've got that, like the rock star head. You seem like you're just a down to earth guy that kind of goes and does what he does. I just find it really interesting that one of the things you did was go from being that kid in your basement and going like, I want to play my guitar, and now that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you opened your festival, but then you started like being this business guy.
Yeah.
And now you're like out on tour with like major names.
Yeah.
How do you sort of like compartmentalize all of that? Or am I just overthinking shit you don't even think about?
Well, I had such a huge drive, and I guess I still do. And I just always had like these crazy dreams and wanted to achieve them. And it's funny because, I guess people might think from the outside, if they don't know me, that, I'm pretentious or whatever, but then they meet me and they're like, oh shit, you're really down to earth. I mean, I think when I was younger, like I was more pretentious in the sense that, I so wanted to prove to the whole world like what I was able to do. But when it actually happened, I kind of felt like, oh, I don't really have anything to prove. I just did it. And, I guess it's part of maturing as well, probably. But, I think I'm pretty relaxed and everything. And, I guess living in Montebello also keeps me grounded in the sense that, I get to travel the world and do all these crazy things. And, I've had quite an insane life so far. So, coming back here where it's just like silence and it's where I grew up and everything, I guess it kind of keeps me from forgetting my roots perhaps. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it absolutely does. To the best of your ability, and it might be zero, what do you think the future holds?
For now, my focus is on the first edition of this new festival.
Right.
So I'm really focused on that right now.
Do you have aspirations for it, or is it just, I just want to get this one done?
You know what? Like, even before, this whole thing went down with Rockfest, if I'm totally being honest, like for a few years, I already kind of felt like I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And, it surpassed my wildest dreams. And, sure, there's always bands that I'm like, oh, fuck, I would have wanted to book this band and they weren't available. But aside from, stuff like that, I achieved everything I wanted to achieve. And so in terms of the festival, it's like, there's nothing that I'm like, oh, fuck, I still need to achieve this, so I'm doing it more for fun and because I love doing it. and I'd love to get involved with like other festivals or like other types of music and stuff. Aside from the festival stuff, like in regards to Deadly Apples, like we've been working on new music for the past couple months, and this whole situation that I went through really inspired me, in terms of lyrics and songs, and it was kind of therapeutic. Maybe it sounds cliche to say that, but it's
cliches are cliches for a reason.
Yeah, and it's really helped me get through it, basically. So we hope to release a new EP later this year.
Nice. Are you recording already, or?
We've been recording like demo versions of the songs, and then eventually we're gonna get into a studio to actually record the real versions, I guess. And aside from that, the project that I've been wanting to do for years is actually write a book about the history of the festival, and like, there's even just with what people saw on the surface, you can write a whole book about it.
Right.
But, add to that like all, the stuff that people don't know about and what goes on behind the scenes. And, there's so many like crazy stories, stories of like, debauchery that happened, backstage and stuff. And, but I guess it's more of the cliche stuff of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But
people like sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about it more so in the sense of like from a promoter's perspective, and like all the ups and downs and the challenges that I faced and with my team and everything. It's just been a huge roller coaster, and it's been kind of crazy. I think it's a unique story, and the festival goers and even people in general, I guess, would be interested in finding out more about everything that went on. So that's something else that I want to start working on. I feel like it's kind of the right timing. So that's pretty much what I have coming up in the next couple of months. So
let me ask you this, and this will be my last question. I'll let you go. If we shut the lights off right now, right? Everything's done. There is no more going forward. How do you feel about life so far?
You mean like if...
Are you proud of what you've done? Or are you still... or are you upset at the results?
No, I'm really proud of everything I achieved. I'm definitely upset about how things ended for the old entity of Rockfest. Like that's definitely how I would have wanted things to happen. But if I look at the overall picture, like I think it's I've done more so far than lots of people do in their lifetimes, and I'm still pretty young. So I'm happy of everything I achieved. Now I just need a vacation right now, because I haven't stopped like a day since last year's festival, just dealing with all that stuff and putting this new festival together. So I think once the lineup is announced and everything for this year, I'm just gonna take at least a week off, in like over a year or something. So. And then, I'll be a bit more energetic.
That's it. Well, I know by the time this goes out, you definitely will have announced your lineup, because this probably won't go until May. So I'm sure people will be able to follow links below to get all of that information. We'll make sure to give them all of your information as well. Thanks for hanging out with me, man.
Yeah, well,
it's such a
thanks
pleasure.
For having me on your podcast.
100%.
I appreciate it.
All right, folks. Like I just said, all the links are downstairs like normal, and we've got some videos coming up after this that you can click on and go see other stuff. We'll catch you next week. That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.